Hi, welcome to the 2023-24 Shawano Community High School Co-Curricular Code video. My name is Joel Wonder and I serve as the Activities Director for the Shawano Community School District. If you need to reach out to the Athletic or Activities Department, you can reach either myself or my assistant Heather Kelter at the contact information displayed on your screen. You also can find additional information related to athletics and activities by visiting the Shawano School District website, www.shawanoschools.com. And if you go to the Schools tab, choose the high school, click the Students button, and then choose Hawks Athletics or Activities, you will find general information related to our programs. You also can find team-specific pages, including team schedules, team policies, contact information for the coaching staff, and more on those team pages. It's important that all students who participate in our co-curricular activities are familiar with our co-curricular code. I want to be clear that this video is not meant to be a complete summary of the co-curricular code. It only highlights a small fraction of the details included in the code. It's important that you take time to review the code in full detail to make sure you understand all the provisions of the code. You will be agreeing to abide by the standards that are outlined in this code when you participate in any of our co-curricular activities, and therefore you should be aware of what you are agreeing to. Ignorance of the code is not a justification if you are found to be in violation of the code and you face sanctions. It's especially important that you review this code if you're new to our district. I want to begin by mentioning that the 2023-24 code does not contain any significant changes from last year's code. There are some minor editorial changes, but the basic policies and provisions of the code will remain consistent from last year. I want to begin by explaining our code and the structure of our code. Our code is broken into three categories of activities. You can find an outline of those activities on page 5 of the code. They include Category 1, which are all of our athletic offerings, including cheer, dance, and color guard. Category 2, which covers class officers, club officers, and dance court members. And Category 3 activities, which include all non-athletic activities, clubs, and organizations. For any one of those three categories of activity, there are some general academic requirements that apply. The academic eligibility is based on grades from each of the 6-week grade check intervals that are conducted throughout the school year. We will check grades in weeks 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, and 36. Weeks 6, 12, 24, and 30 are considered progress report checks. The standard for minimum academic progress in those checks is that a student may not have more than one failing grade. When we check grades in weeks 18 or 36, we are checking semester grades that make up a student's final grade for a course and are applied to their student transcript. In these grade checks, a student must be passing all of their classes to remain eligible for participation in co-curricular activities. Important to note that the week 36 grades, or in other words, the end of the school year grades, determine the eligibility for the following fall. You can find the tentative dates that have been outlined for grade checks on page 7 of the co-curricular code. If a student is found to not be meeting the minimum academic standards, they'll become academically ineligible. The ineligible period will be as follows. In the fall season, the academic ineligibility period is 21 calendar days from the date of the first allowable scheduled contest in that particular sport. You can find a summary of these dates on page 7 of the code. During the remainder of the school year, including the winter and spring seasons, the academic ineligibility period will be 15 scheduled school days beginning on the date of the grade check. Additionally, general eligibility requirements, and especially for athletics, include a WIAA current physical or the WIAA alternate year card, acknowledgement of warning, the 2023-24 WIAA Eligibility Information Bulletin, WIAA Concussion and Sudden Cardiac Arrest Parent and Athlete Acknowledgement, emergency medical and contact information, a ThedaCare disclosure, and a co-curricular code agreement. New this year, instead of filling out a packet of paper, you'll be completing these items online. The athletic participation fee is still $15 per sport, but will not be due at the time of registration. Instead, it will post to the student's Skyward account approximately 2 weeks after practices begin. Unlike in previous years, you will not receive a permit to practice card this year. Instead, your coaches will be notified automatically, electronically, through the RSchool system of the students that are registered for their program that are cleared to begin practice. Another provision of eligibility is school attendance. This also applies to all categories of the code. To be eligible to participate in any co-curricular activities on a particular school day, a student must be in attendance at school no later than 8:20 a.m. They also may not have any unexcused absences from any class for that day. If they go home ill for any portion of the day, they would not be eligible for activities that day. If any of the above happen on a Friday or the day before a non-school day or a holiday, the student is also ineligible for participation on the next day. Excused absences for an appointment are acceptable if accompanied by a note from the provider, such as a dentist or a doctor or a college visit. A parent who calls their child in and excuses them because they're not feeling well or because they've got family matters to take care of at home, those students will be excused for the purposes of attendance, but not for participation in co-curriculars. A parent excuse, I want to be clear, does not excuse a child and allow them to participate in that day's co-curricular activities. Another major component that is covered in our co-curricular code is student behavioral conduct. From page 4 of the code in the philosophy statement, it is the position of the Shawano Community School District that involvement in co-curricular activities is a privilege with accompanying responsibilities and expectations. In other words, our participants in co-curricular activities are held to a higher standard than the general student body. You are expected to represent your school, your community, and the activity that you're participating in to the highest standards of behavior. Conduct within our co-curricular code is outlined in a tiered behavioral system that you can find on pages 11 and page 19. These grids include the type of behaviors that are included in each tier, the threshold for the violation, and the potential penalties that come with those violations of each tier. Most notably are the Tier 3 violations that include drug, alcohol, tobacco, and vaping kinds of offenses. The consequences are outlined in a step system. There is a noted difference between a student who attends a gathering where these kinds of behaviors are taking place but does not participate versus a student who is in full participation with the use of drugs, alcohol, tobacco, or vaping activities. The consequences for violating our code under Tier 3 include generally in Category 1 a suspension from a percentage of the scheduled athletic contests in a particular season. For Category 2 activities, it is a removal from the court or the elected position for the remainder of the school year. And in Category 3, the penalties relate to community service requirements that must be completed before a student can return to publicly representing our school in a contest, competition, performance, or other public setting that their activity is participating in. A few other things that are outlined in our code that I want to highlight include our policies for student travel. Students are expected to travel to and from all co-curricular activities with their team or their group using the district-provided transportation, usually that's busing. We do permit students to travel with his or her parent to or from activities if they have completed a travel release form before they leave for the activity. This form needs to be completed and signed by a district administrator and turned into their activity leader or coach before they leave for the activity. Under no circumstances may a student transport himself or herself to a co-curricular activity, nor may they transport any other students. I also want to address the topic of hazing. Our school district has a zero tolerance for hazing. Hazing is defined as any humiliating or dangerous activity expected of a student to belong to a group, regardless of the willingness to participate. Some examples, not meant to be all-inclusive, of hazing include personal servitude, sleep deprivation and restrictions on personal hygiene, yelling, swearing, and insulting new members or rookies of a group, being forced to wear embarrassing or humiliating attire in public, consumption of vile substances or smearing of such on one's skins, branding, physical beatings, binge drinking and drinking games, and sexual simulation and or sexual assault. If you experience hazing or you are aware of hazing occurring to any of our students, you are expected to report those incidents of hazing to your coach or the activities director immediately. I also want to remind our students that photo and videos are not allowed to be captured in our locker room settings. This is a violation of Wisconsin state statutes. Phones and other devices capable of recordings should not be used in a locker room setting or a restroom setting. These items instead should remain secured in your locker. I want to be clear that it doesn't matter if the images or videos captured are done with the consent of those being recorded. In no case should students be capturing video or recordings in a locker room or restroom setting. We also expect positive sportsmanship from our athletes and the spectators at our events. Players, coaches, and spectators are expected to represent themselves, their teams, our school, and our community by displaying positive sportsmanship to our opponents, the officials, and game management. When players act in an unsportsmanlike way in sports, there often is a defined consequence according to the rules of the sport, such as a 15-yard penalty in football or a technical foul in basketball, or being sent to the penalty box or receiving a yellow card. If a student is ejected from a contest, the player may also receive an additional penalty from the WIAA. Normally that means the student will be suspended from the next scheduled contest as well. Depending on the nature and the severity of the offense, the behavior may be determined to be a Tier 2 conduct violation of our code and may result in a code violation and additional subsequent penalties. That covers the highlights of our code. Again, it is not an inclusive, complete summary of our code. I encourage you to take the time to review the code in closer detail. You can find a link to the code in the online registration. I ask that you do that, and again remind you that ignorance of the provisions of our code is not an acceptable defense if a student violates the code. If you need to reach me or my administrative assistant, Heather Kelter, once again, our contact information is on your screen. I want to wish you the very best in the upcoming school year, whether it's a sport or an activity that you're a part of. I encourage you to give it your all, make the most of your opportunities, and do a great job of representing yourself and Shawano Community High School. Thank you.